Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 22nd, and well, we're approaching fall, and literally it's kind of what we got. What an exciting day again. Started off with a huge push to the open in futures aftermarket, and it just sold off from there and then went back and forth in between, and it was a real fight. Knew they really wanted to close green for the day, which I think they got, simply for the effect of saying, hey, the market closed up, even if it was like barely a fraction of a second between before it went to zero. In fact, we're in after hours right now, and you can see we're just printing red right there. From a daily standpoint, we had the start of magenta coming back, which was enough to give it that boost. But we still hadn't crossed red underneath the, white underneath red, so we were still within that broader sell configuration. Even still, when we look at the DOC, we still have orange stuck between red and cyan, which is still a continuation. So that hasn't changed, but it means we may see some little uplifts in between with that rising yellow. As well as magenta on the MBI readings, but we're still below the red line, which means lows are likely to be revisited, which would put us back down to that 23. This just staved off a lot of what you might see as margin calls and things, because that pump in the morning certainly probably alleviated a lot of the pain, and this was off the heels of that massive run up from minus 127 the previous day to bringing it to within minus 80 points. So that helped quite a bit, and that push-up was probably enough to stave off a lot of that negativity. And from the NASDAQ standpoint, we saw that the white had still been leading, and that was going to be the bigger case, whether or not that would draw down the S&P, or at least keep it from moving. And sure enough, that white leading had the exact effect that we expected with that. And of course, the reserved gold, as the expectation of their credit contagions, things like that. That certainly is a force back to commodities. From a euro standpoint, again, you're not getting any help there. The eurozone is a disaster as well. Oil still holding on, and as long as it remains elevated, and particularly if it pushes up towards the highs, certainly is going to be problematic. That transitory inflation story won't hold up at that point. The question was always whether or not we would see some decline out of Bitcoin as people are forced to cover to get into cover margin as well as new buying power, and it remained weak as well, even off of its bounce from before. So clearly that relationship kind of exists there, and that's something to follow in the future as we look to it. We'll turn to the 5K. So here you see, let me just slide back just a fraction more. So this was that late afternoon pump that saw a massive increase, held flat after hours started, and we pushed back up to these previous algo levels, and sure enough, as soon as we hit them, it kind of held steady there, and it became really clean shorts there. In particular, from an intraday standpoint, when I see the white move above red, and we've got the magenta below yellow and below the 33 level, when it gets below 25, usually that's a pretty strong indicator that you're going to end up continuing to move in that direction, and it did stay under there, so it was no surprise when that white crossed over, and sure enough, that led to the first run to the bottom, and that was literally just to fill some of those positive strings that caught a bid back up, but didn't change the fact that we still had that super high ride. They just held it off for a fraction right there, and once that turned around, did the exact same thing right there, that magenta candle, and boom, all the way back to the zero. We were posting about that one as it was taking place. That led to just a series of weak every time there was a pop, and below the 23%. Kept caving. You'll see the yellow dots representation of when we are below that 23%, and you don't have a steel reset, and when it does, it disappears right there. It's the small little gaps when you have a full reset, and then the setup begins again if we're still in those configurations, and so that caused continued weakness going through there. And then when you started to catch the build later part of the day, they were just testing the waters to see, because they really needed that positive finish. And 4350 became that magnet. So you can see it was a support right there, which was the fill of all those positive extremes anyway. So trading above it, they weren't able to get to the next algo level at the 4382, and when that roll-off started, that was an easy call straight back to the zero level, without any hesitation. And then we were getting closer towards the end. Could predict that within an hour they were going to try and do short cover bursts, and I pointed out to start looking for large candles that brought us up to the key levels to try and force short cover moves, and that's what they accomplished as they were going through here. And then literally, I mean, we look at the timestamp on that, there's less than 15 minutes left in the market right here. And was always going to be the question whether or not bulls would want to start exiting, and boy did they start wanting to exiting. We got to that 4350, they tried to hold it there, but literally as the bell was just about to sound, you can see right there, 4341, literally seconds before, well, literally 1 second before the close, and that went past the close for that final one, but probably just enough to give it that green tip. And no question, with the white leading, continuing to face now, even though we had the turnaround here of the magenta, and that, I find that when red leads, and particularly when it shoots up past that 25 range on a turnaround, it rarely has enough staying power to do anything, not to mention the fact that we saw the yellow dots suggesting no steal reset. Didn't even get a dip of orange below red here in a 5K, so definitely problematic. If we flip over to a 50K, you can see how clean that was throughout that move, and stopped literally right before the turnaround, and that led to that push up. But what was interesting is we were starting to get this spike, didn't quite make it up over the 33 level. 28.96 was the weight there, if you see on the screen, and had we gotten up a little bit more, I would have really been strong on the belief that we were going to head straight down to zero, but it rolled over a little bit faster, still leading over the pecan magenta, so still projecting weakness within that, but probably would have been a little more rapid within that one if they hadn't been able to hold that up for a little bit. That's still the target, which I said was down at the 4,300, and it's actually 4,293, but round it up a little bit. All in all, exactly within expectations and right within plan, and it's just the power of being able to see these configurations. And whenever we have these white spikes, even particular when there's the white spike, even though the magenta was leading, when that magenta does break down and you get the white to move back above red when you're below that 33, and you have the crossovers of magenta under yellow, and then also even that yellow moving below the orange, because that's just a derivative of the yellow line, and that was all it took. And so that was a little early. That actually happened right up there at the 61 level. The full-on red candle didn't take place to the 54 because of the big drop there, but we were already above it at that point, and it was still continuing, so there was nothing wrong. I mean, yes, took a little heat on it, but still, when this candle dropped, I knew it was over at that particular point, and it made it super simple to just stick with it and watch it cascade lower. There you have it, long and the short of it. Market's still trading in after hours. You can see -8 already, heading towards that 50K down at the 43. We'll see if they're able to hold it. No one says it's going to be just a one filled swoop down there. There's always competing interest, short covering, and things like that. But overall, tends to do exactly what they're pointing out to us ahead of time. And these will be some of the fills of the positive extremes before the big rally. Let me slide back so you can see that one as well. So we had this one that we were looking at, the 4350, but we still have positive extremes going all the way back here that have to get filled down at 43. So 4307 particularly is where that's marked at. So it's not showing on the little 5K chart yet because we're not low enough for that. But that's going to be the gravity between these 2 points, and you're just filling a variety of positive extremes, and that's just the algos satisfying themselves from getting the higher price, being able to short at a higher price, doing it all over. As always, trade well. I'll keep posting details on that as warranted. Have a good one.